Thank you for joining us in our Women in Leadership series. As a Beyond Recruitment business, we've found that there's a lot of discussion at the moment around women not being in leadership roles, women not serving on boards, and women not serving on executive tables. We've actually found that there are so many stories to share, so many women that have done well in leadership, and so many organisations that are running fantastic programs to help women grow in their leadership roles, and we'd like to take you on this journey with them. Thank you for joining us. Shirvani, thank you so much for joining us today. As a Beyond Recruitment business, we're so passionate about women in leadership, and I guess one of the things that we wanted to do is to profile women that have got ahead in leadership, but also to acknowledge the organisations that are doing so much in New Zealand to actually move women forward. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Shirvani, tell me a little bit about your background and at what point you believe you entered the realm or the reality of leadership.
I think leadership, there's two parts of it. I think there's when you become, I guess, a people leader, or when you've naturally, I guess, been a leader, even to your peers and things like that. If I think in relation to me, I think my leadership attributes came out quite young, even when I was actually in high school and working at a part-time job at the supermarket. Very quickly after a few months, going from checkout to being the supervisor. So I think there was probably some natural leadership traits there. I think in the corporate sense, my current role at the moment as head of HR is probably where I've had the biggest people leadership role.
In terms of your learnings, what have been the greatest learnings around leadership?
I would say, there's been many learnings, right, throughout my whole career so far. But what I would say is the one that sticks out the most to me is just the ability to execute. I know a lot of people talk about having great ideas and great strategies, which is essential and very critical. But I think the ability to take those ideas and strategies and actually execute and put them in place is actually something that's just so critical to anyone's success. And I still see time and time again great ideas, great strategies, but sometimes they just stay on the paper. So I think that's one of the biggest learnings, I would say, for leadership and success in any role is execute.
For you, serving as an HR practitioner and leading an HR function, as well as being in a leadership role, you would come across a number of different scenarios around people wanting to work their way up into leadership. What would your advice be to people wanting to move up that leadership ladder?
I would say attitude and behaviour is, especially as you get up the ladder, is honestly sometimes overtakes sometimes technical ability, because I guess the more senior you get, the more people underneath you and the technical experts you have. So your ability to build relationships, to be able to get things done becomes more critical, I think. So I would say just being really conscious about relationships in the workplace, how you treat people, how you behave, that sincere approach. I think, again, I've seen it many a times, people that have got into leadership roles and sometimes actually haven't lasted long in it because they don't end up nailing that relationship piece, I think. So it becomes more about influencing.
You've spoken about being a leader in early stages of life, and there's a debate as to whether leadership is learned, taught, or whether it's inherently in a person and an individual. What are your thoughts around that?
I've got quite a strong view on it actually, and I don't know if it's a favourable view, but I think there's definitely quite a few elements of leadership that's innate. I certainly don't think you can't learn at all. We're rolling out programs at the moment about developing leaders, and it's learning about becoming a great leader. But I think the really great leaders, a lot of it is innate. I really do. And I've had so many discussions with people over the years about this, and I know it is can be quite a controversial topic, but I think absolutely anyone can learn anything at any time. So it doesn't mean it's restricted to that.
And learning anything at any time comes from mentorship and coaching. Tell me a little bit about mentorship and coaching. There's obviously, a lot of mentors that you would have had in your experience or in your journey. Tell me about what you've learned from mentors or what you've taken away from.
I've been actually fortunate enough to have, in every role I've had so far, really great leaders that I report to. So I think I've organically had great and supportive managers who have then acted as my mentor. I think what's been key with that is always knowing what you don't know, and the ability to always learn from any situation you've been involved in. So if you've done a project, to actually take the time and reflect on it with your leader, with your a person that's a senior in the area or something like that. And if you really adopt that learning approach, I think whether it's a direct mentor or a colleague that you can learn something from, it's going to help you grow. A lot of people, everyone's running a million miles an hour. Often you don't take time to just stop and reflect on a piece of work you've done to actually get the learnings from it.
What are the key attributes, do you think, that make a leader?
I think the main things is to trust. I think just trust your people, trust your organisation. I think empower. You'd be surprised, the more rope you give people and the more breath you give them to play with, they just surprise you time and time again. And then people end up respecting and just following you, I think, if they genuinely feel that they're empowered.
Do you believe that there's enough being done in New Zealand to take women into leadership roles?
I think we're making really, really good progress. So if I think about my experience in all the workplaces I've been in personally, I would not have an issue with women in leadership at all. I think there's lots of opportunity. I see lots of women in leadership. A lot of people I interact with in the industry are women. I think right at that top level, in those big organisations at the top table, I think we still have a little way to go. But honestly, I don't think there's that many restrictions from my experience with being a woman in the workplace, at all levels, I would say, including as you get further up.
Do you think there's any discrimination?
I can't say personally that I've experienced any barriers in relation to me being a woman, which is quite refreshing and I think quite good to say. I've probably experienced in the past barriers against age. I think a perception of experience or ability with a perception of how old you are. So I've probably experienced that. I've ignored it.
As a young person or as an older person?
Young. Yep, young. I'm unfortunately not experiencing it so much now, which tells you I'm probably getting a bit older. but I've got to say I've probably, in the past had a few times where people perceive, you can do this because you look like you're young.
Shirvani, balancing family life and being in a career is something that a lot of people talk about. How do you balance family life and building your career in leadership?
I am fortunate enough, I guess, to have quite a supportive family, and I've also got my mum and mother-in-law, and my husband does a lot. So I know a lot of people, especially being in HR, and you see a lot of people in the workplace who have a lot of restrictions with not having much family support. So the amount of time they've got to take off work and things like that does become quite difficult.
And I guess for women aspiring to become leaders or emerging leaders that are just working their way through their journey, what would your advice be to those people?
I would say just be quite tenacious with your goals, really. There's always going to be people that will give you feedback that maybe you're not ready for the next step or you haven't got the skill set for this. And honestly, quite bluntly, I would say if you believe in yourself and you know what you can do, is just basically ignore it and just keep going on your journey. And if you just head down, you do a good job, you execute, it comes. If people recognise you when you do a good job, I think in most organisations.
Tell me a little bit about leadership development and leadership training. In your organisation, you're obviously committed
Yes.
to developing leadership. How,
Yes.
what is it an environment where you're specifically teaching, or is there, what's that journey about?
The one thing I would say about leadership, which is why I'm a big fan of it from an HR perspective, is I think it's probably one of the key levers you can pull in any organisation to shape the culture or even be successful. I think you can have a great organisation, you can have a great product or service you're selling, you can be quite successful as an organisation. But the oldest cliche line in HR is, people leave their bosses, not the organisation. And I think if you don't, and I guess on the flip side of that, sometimes people stay because of their leaders. So I would say, it's the most critical lever to pull. So that's why, in every plan I ever have, leadership's probably the non-negotiable that never comes off it.
Thank you. Shirvani, it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Talking to you and you
great.
sharing your journey. We do appreciate your time and we wish you all the best on the next stage of your journey.
Great, thank you for your time.